Hello, everyone. I am Kaya Yurieff, a reporter at The Information covering the creator economy. I am very excited to introduce our panelists. We have Lauren Zoltick, who is head of social and partnerships at Storyblocks, and creators Shannon Beveridge and Samir Chaudry. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I want to zoom out to start for a second. It's been a particularly noisy and sometimes confusing time to be a creator or brand on social media. Platforms are racing out to roll out competing creator funds, short form video, tipping, subscriptions, the list goes on and on. How do you keep up with all the changes and kind of decide where to put your time and energy into? Samir, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when I first started, I was uploading to YouTube in 2012. So there was only one place to upload video. And, today where there's so many different places to upload video and so many different places to, put your brand out there, I think it's actually not that different from 2012, where the core of it all was just what is your brand, who is your audience, and where do they live, and telling that story to that audience. So if you're like, for us, we are kind of like creator education, almost like this like B2B hub, right? So our audience is not as much on TikTok as it is, in newsletters, which is why we started a newsletter. So for us, it's just about finding your audience where they are and using the tools that are at your disposal, but not feeling like you have to be everywhere. You just have to be where your audience is. So that's kind of how we view it.
What about you, Shannon?
Well, similarly to Samir, I've been on YouTube since like 2012. And when I started YouTube, there was really just like YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. So you post a YouTube video, you tweet the link, and then you maybe post an Instagram picture, just being like, I posted a YouTube video. And then over the years with like Instagram stories, Twitter stories, live feeds, Instagram live, TikTok, Twitch, like there's this explosion of so many other platforms to self-promote. And I think it's smart to like hone in on the ones that you think your audience is at, but sometimes that's harder to put into perspective. Like, where should I be focusing my time? And for me personally, it's just created more of like an overwhelming sense of like, I just don't want to post anything anywhere because I don't know where to put it, So it's awesome if you can figure out where they are, but it's also can be harder if like you can't narrow in on where that is, basically. So yeah.
And Lauren, from the brand perspective, are you feeling more pressure to do short form video campaigns now with all the new features coming out, or how do you decide from the brand side?
Yes. So yeah, I think as a lot of social platforms have sort of kind of copied off of each other, and there's a lot more of the same across different platforms, it's harder to decide as a brand or a creator where to focus your energy. And for us, whether it's self-imposed or otherwise, we definitely feel a lot of pressure to create more short form video and take advantage of the organic reach that's available on things like TikTok or Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. And so the way that we've had to approach it is we've had to sort of shift our thinking around how we create video content. And for us, I mean, we do some of the hopefully obvious things of like using Storyblocks, but we also have become a little less precious with the fidelity of our content. So instead of having a full shoot and like production team for everything that we're putting out, we've started to just be okay with it not being perfect, shooting things on iPhone, and getting comfortable with that. And I think the other thing that we've done is, in a minute, you're not able to have an ad read and a piece of content that you think your audience is going to engage with. So we've had to sort of combine the two and create content that hooks people in, but also shows who we are as a brand and our product. And we've been influenced a lot by TikTok creators. Like one we've worked with is Grace Wells, who makes these commercials for everyday things, like paper clips or dirt. And she made a commercial for us around fire. And in order to not burn her family home down, she used Storyblocks footage. And so it felt like one of her regular, videos, but it was sponsored, and throughout it, you saw the Storyblocks product in our library of stock footage, and it just felt like kind of native to TikTok and not like an ad. And so we've tried to emulate that in our own content.
And pricing is very opaque in this industry. As creators, how do you decide, or how do you know how much to charge for a sponsorship deal? And was that something you just kind of learned over time? Shannon, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. For me, having a manager is like a key step between me and a brand. I think when it was just me trying to communicate directly to brands, it's a lot more complicated to be like, this is my rate and this is what I deserve. Whereas if you have a manager and you have that middle person, I even know some creators who've had fake managers where they just make an email that's not really a real person, but they communicate what they want through that. But yeah, having that middleman makes it way more easy. And the fact that my manager manages multiple creators and knows what they're getting offered, it creates like more of an industry standard. But there definitely is a lack of like transparency about how much money creators do make. And there are people who are now like trying to change that too. Like there's a TikToker named Victoria Paris who talks a lot about like how much money she's making. And it's kind of refreshing because I think for so long it was kind of like this secret game of like no one knowing, and then also like just kind of an uncomfortable thing to even ask. But it's really important that we know and have transparency so that like a brand isn't reaching out to me offering me $2,000 and offering someone with like really similar statistics of like whatever engagement like $10,000 just because they're, you know, maybe a straight white man, who knows. But basically, yeah, I think transparency in pay would be really helpful for the whole industry of social influencing, and it doesn't really exist completely yet.
Yeah, I would say on our side, like we spent a lot of years just, you know, I guess self-managed, right? With me as kind of like the manager of the brand. And in those years, the way we thought about pricing, we like to split it up into two categories, like production and distribution, right? As a creator, you're doing it all. You're both the network and the production company, right? And so at the core of it, the reason a brand is involved with you is because you've put together an audience. You're, you know, essentially engaging an audience that they have similar interests to. So what we found is that as we start to look at all these factors, if we are very clear cut about who our audience is, then the brands that emerge that want to work with us want access to that audience because we're mission aligned, right? So for us, like we want to educate and empower the next generation of creators. It's like a very natural fit with Lauren and Storyblocks. It's a very natural fit with all of the sponsors that we work with. And so being really open and clear about that mission, but that's only one piece of the puzzle around distributing to that audience, right? We're still also making the content and making the ad. And so we like to think about it in those two ways of saying there is a production cost and there is a distribution cost. But as a core, I would say the simplest way for a creator to think about their own pricing, especially in the beginning, is just recognizing your ins and outs. Like how much money does it cost you to exist as a company or as a solo creator? Like even if it's just your own expenses, write all those down and be like, if I want this to be my full-time job, here's where I need to get. That's the price that I would want for, you know, if I'm uploading once a week, I need to make, let's say $10,000 a month. You can do that math pretty simply. And then if you're not at that point yet with your audience where brands are willing to pay that, then you need to do the work to get yourself to that point and, you know, figure out your finances outside of that. I would say like, that's the challenging part of being a creator. But the amazing part is that as you continue to grow, you know, ideally your production costs stay very similar, but the distribution cost goes up because your audience grows, right? And so I think that's like the value, but it is very challenging. And I would say to Shannon's point, like even for someone like myself who considers, like I've always considered myself an entrepreneur. I love being in the business side of being a creator. I've had to let go of a lot of that as we've started to grow. And I would say bringing on support has been one of the most helpful things that we've done as creators. Like we can take ourselves from that 0 to 1, but to really build a true business and to actually understand how you're going to be priced in the market after you kind of go through that startup period of being a creator, you definitely need support. And it's helpful to have people who have worked across other deals and are aware of what's happening in the industry. But I'd say just as a creator, like the simplest thing to do, what we did as we started to grow was just write down how much it costs us to exist and see what we need to make to cover those expenses. Cause that's the dream for us, is like, can we actually exist being creators? And I think communicating that to brands too. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but get yourself to that point where you can make that work.
And Lauren, what can be done to increase the pay transparency? Is there something brands can do to help with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. On our end, we have cost per reach targets that we try and hit, and they're influenced by a few different factors. I think what Samir was saying is a major one. So, for example, we'll pay more for a niche audience that's really in line with our own than we would for a broad audience. And we try to be really transparent with our partners on what those targets are, as well as the performance of our integrations with them in the past. So we release like quarterly reports that show the value they've driven for Storyblocks compared to the costs. And so we try and arm our partners with everything that they would need to request a fair compensation for the work. And sometimes we still get folks that will undervalue themselves. And in those situations when we're able to, we've countered with higher offers. And I think that's pretty uncommon. I'd love to see more brands do that. And I still think there's a lot of brands, like there's the Ryan James Crothers and Unfold story that happened this year where they reached out to him for a Pride campaign and they weren't willing to pay. So there's definitely, as Shannon was pointing out, like a big gap, especially with marginalized communities and creators not getting paid fairly. I know that there's an app called Clara that's being produced on the creator side, which is basically like Glassdoor for influencers, which can help with some of that. But I do think in the same way that it should be on brands or companies to pay their own employees fairly across like gender and race and other diversity types, it should be on brands to pay creators equitably as well. So hopefully we will see more brands do that in the future.
Yeah, and Lauren, staying on that topic, I mean, you often see brands do a really big push with diverse creators around times of year, like Pride Month or Black History Month. What's kind of the best approach for brands to make sure they're really improving representation across the board?
Yeah, I think from our end, the main thing we do is we try not to make it around a specific month as much as we can. So, I think sometimes you get more marketing budget around those months to do some of those things, but ideally we try and have long-term partnerships as much as we can. And so with those creators that are from different marginalized communities, we try and keep those same types of relationships that we would, regardless of the time of year it is, as much as possible.
Shannon, I'd love to get your take on this too, and what brands can be doing better.
Yeah, it is. It obviously is difficult because, Pride Month comes around and like you hope that brands are working with actually queer creators, but then there is also all this, like, I think like 10 years ago, people were really excited if a brand just changed their Instagram handle to a rainbow because we had so little representation that the bar was set very low. It was like, oh my gosh, Bank of America would put a pride flag on their thing and people were like, that was enough then. I think the thing is that is not enough now. And that's why we're getting a lot of queer creators and marginalized creators being like, do more. Like 10 years ago, cool. Today, absolutely not. Like put your money where your mouth is, like have queer representation or people of color represented in your like brand campaigns year round. And obviously like there are going to be like these highlight moments in months that are about whatever these communities, and that's good too, but like do it in a more authentic, genuine way. I just think that we're all kind of like past the, I don't know, like the most basic dumb representation that we all know is like, it's just like low hanging fruit. And we know that brands have the capability of doing more, and we know they have budget to do more, and we know that they have full teams working behind the scenes of trying to do these things. It's like, show us more, like show us that you actually care.
And Lauren, how are you deciding which creators to work with? Are you sourcing and DMing creators yourself, or are you relying on third-party agencies to help?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix. We try and do as much of it on our own as we can. But there are moments just based on the sheer like scale and number of creators we partner with where we're not able to do all of it on our own. So we have worked with third-party agencies, and they can help alleviate some of the like time it takes to scout and to project manage some of those relationships. But I think working with folks directly when we can, or even if it's through a third-party agency, like trying to develop those relationships, those direct relationships as much as we can is definitely a big effort on our part, because I think it creates a stronger partnership and we see better results. Like I think we probably wouldn't be doing this conversation with Shannon and Samir if that hadn't happened. I think for us, in terms of like how we pick or who to work with, the biggest thing from our end is fit. So we want to work with folks that like would actually or are actually using Storyblocks, are within our target audience. So Samir is a great example. You often reference like in your integrations with us that you use Storyblocks prior to becoming a partner. And that's really something that we look for. And then I think on the performance side, we focus a lot on, video views and engagement, but also, and that more so than like followers or subscribers, but we also look at consistency and how that compares to the price. So those are sort of the main factors we're looking for in terms of how we pick and how we scout folks out.
Samir, I want to know, what are the mistakes that brands make when working with you? Like, what are the biggest no-nos?
Yeah, I would say the thing that we look out for, like in our conversations, is if a brand is truly just pricing us on CPM, or like just on our performance, because it feels like then there's potentially like a misunderstanding of what we're creating. And I think that that's like it's a very simple way to recognize and price, but it's like there's a gap in what is this, who is this audience, what's the mission of this brand. Like, I think we've come a long way from true just CPM buys. We also don't really look at anyone who wants to have performance-based campaigns around like acquisition. So meaning like, we'll pay you if we get X amount of customers. It's just not something that we feel is representative of what we're doing. The reality is, like, when we put an advertisement into one of our pieces of content, YouTube is not, we upload and then that day it performs and then we move on. We have videos from 2 years ago that pick up. I mean, we just had a video from 2 years ago get 100,000 views last week, right? So like, it's an evergreen library of content. And as our brand grows, that library of content will grow. And these sponsors are embedded in our story, in our content. And I think that's a really important thing to note. And we want to work with partners that recognize that. And I'd say, like, Lauren mentioned this, like Storyblocks is a partner that we were organically using, and actually our first long-term partner. And I think on the inverse of that, of what we love, is when a brand comes and does want to do a longer term partnership and recognizes that, like, us as a brand is mission aligned with what they're doing. Like, they have a similar mission, and that can reflect that in the partnership, and can look at us on a longer term basis and say, let's look at a year and what it looks like to support you for a year. Because one of the biggest game changers from us going from two guys making videos in our car and having other jobs to us in a studio with a team of 10 was long-term partnerships and recurring revenue. So as a creator, like, recurring revenue is really few and far between when you're first starting out, right? And so a brand that comes in and is not just looking at you from a viewership perspective, but looking at the holistic, like, how are you going to grow? Or I believe in the way that you're going to grow over the next year. I believe in the audience you're speaking with. And we think if we give you this, annual contract, the reality is the creators like us, like, we'll have the stability to then grow. So like, you're putting us in a position to grow alongside with you. And I think, like, when we look at our relationship with Storyblocks or any of our long-term partners, like, they've supported us in getting to where we are today. And we have a different relationship with them now. Like, we have a deep care in the way that they have a care for our career. And so I think, like, the hyper transactional buy is not something that we're that interested in today. Like, if someone says, hey, we want to buy an ad, there's a CPM and here's the rate. That's just not as interesting to us because we feel like it's a much better relationship if we can understand each other and grow together. So I would say that's like what we don't want is like a true transactional email that's just like, here's the offer, here's our CPM. Like we actually don't even deal in that way anymore, and we're lucky to be able to say no. But yeah, what we want is to develop a relationship and have a longer term partnership.
Do you think the industry as a whole is moving away from some of those one-off campaigns to longer term partnerships, or will that not work for every creator?
I don't think it works for every creator, but I think that creators are slowly evolving into modern day media companies. And if they truly do that, then they're going to move in a direction of having a content schedule and having formats and having, recurring segments and operating in a way that they can do that. For us, we did not have a sustainable process to create. So it was hard to say when our next video was coming out. But once we started to evolve ourselves and to looking and feeling more like a media company, which again, also came alongside having, a base of recurring revenue and being able to build a business, that then allowed us to operate in a way where we can predict what's going to happen. We can start to develop a level of consistency. We can, build a team that builds a process that then can start to actually deliver right on the growth that we know we can have. And so I would say that creators are moving in the direction of becoming more sophisticated, and that brands will follow that. And I think brands are also supporting creators in becoming more sophisticated. So I think that's like a symbiotic relationship that's happening right now that I'm experiencing, where all the brands we work with today have supported us to get to where we are now and the level of sophistication we have and the team that we've hired and the studio we have. Like that all comes from our partnerships.
And Shannon, what about you? What are the faux pas that that brands have made? And are you also moving away to more longer term partnerships, or is it a different situation for you and your business?
I mean, I think the biggest no-no when it comes to like brand partnerships is when a brand doesn't trust that your audience. I think that's when you run into the most trouble. Creators know who they're talking to. They've like spent time talking to the people. They've spent time building this like community of people. And so when a brand reaches out and they're like, they don't trust you to create the right content for the people who intimately, that's where the brand partnerships become super like transparent, not effective for either person. Like I once worked with a company to sell a swimsuit, and they asked me 3 times to reshoot the swimsuit in the middle of winter, mind you. So I'm pale and feeling not great about myself. And by the last shoot, they sent me just a picture of Cara Delevingne with a skateboard in a swimsuit. And we're like, this is what we want you to do. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I wish you would have told me that from day one. And at this point, I was so burnt out at taking these swimsuit pictures. I was like, okay. So I grabbed a skateboard from someone else. I don't have a skateboard. Took a picture in the front yard of someone's house, and I hated it, hated the brand partnership. It went fine, but I felt dirty about it. Like it just did not make me ever want to work with that brand again. So yeah, I think the biggest no-no is not trusting that the person you're working with knows how to sell your product. Like if you're already agreeing to do it, at least for me, I only do brand partnerships that I think my audience would actually use or want. So that agreement in and of itself means that I'm going to put work into the creative to make sure that my audience understands why I'm working with the brand. So that's my biggest no-no. But yeah, as far as like long-term partnerships, I think it is like ideal for all creators. I think everyone would want that. Does it work for every creator? Maybe not, especially, for if you're doing like fashion things, like you're wanting to work with different companies. You don't want to be like only able to work with H&M or only able to work with whatever. So it's difficult. I think it is a goal that every creator would want, because it equals sustainability, and it means that you have a like almost a salary, which many creators don't necessarily have a salary that's set. But yeah, I think it's complicated. I think Samir's right that we're moving into into a world where it is like a more symbiotic relationship between creators and brands, and creators are becoming smarter, and we know that we deserve more and need more sustainability. So I think it will happen. I think it'll take time though.
Just to piggyback off of what Shannon said, I think on that first point, Shannon, it's a really good point that one of the things that we look out for too is if we talk to a brand and it's obvious they don't watch our content and we're not that interested, right? And in that situation, it's like they didn't understand what was going to be authentic to you, or why that wouldn't be authentic to you. And we've done those brand partnerships. It's extremely hard. You almost feel like a construction worker, and you're like, you could have gone to an ad agency for this. You didn't have to come to me because this is not what I do. This is not that thing that I do. And so when brands have a misunderstanding of why you exist, why you have built your audience, that's a big no. So I would say if you're a brand looking to reach out to a creator, make sure you watch the creator's content or read the creator's content or whatever it is. Because like when you get on the phone, it's the best feeling in the world as a creator if the person on the other side has watched your most recent video or can comment on it. I actually absolutely love when Lauren shoots me an email about something we've made. And it's just like, oh, she's part of our audience. That's so important to me that you actually understand what we're making so that when we come up with, things to do together, they make sense. The worst feeling is making something that doesn't make sense and then having to put it out to your audience and then feeling kind of icky about it. Like that is the worst feeling as a creator. And I would give that advice to every brand who's listening and every creator who's listening. Just watch out for if the brand actually watches your content. It's so important.
Lauren, does Storyblocks prefer to do longer term partnerships, or are you doing a mix of, one-time or two-time campaigns as well?
Yeah, I would say we prefer it, but we're flexible for a lot of the reasons that Samir and Shannon just went over. I think we need to do long-term partnerships just in order to sustain the number of partners that we have with our current team size. Working with a new partner, you have to find them, brief them, review their content in more detail, versus when we work with someone like Colin and Samir, who we've worked with for 4 or 5 years. They know our product and brand, almost better than anyone else. And so there's just a lot of trust already there, and we're able to, be very hands-off. And so having a lot of those long-term partners, knowing that they're going to be reliable in terms of revenue for us, gives us a little bit more sustainability and allows us to expand the channel even more. There's always situations where we'll work with a new partner, and after a few months, we're just not seeing the return and we're not able to turn it into a long-term partnership. Or there's folks like, I think Shannon might be a good example, where we've worked with you, Shannon, on occasion, and we want it to keep going, but we're not at a point where you necessarily want to have a quarterly or monthly partnership with us. So we try and find the right cadence and working relationships with folks. But yeah, definitely love trying to have as many long-term relationships as we can.
Yeah, and for a long time, these partnerships have just been happening between the creators and the brands and with third parties involved. And we've seen kind of this push over the last year that the social platforms are getting more involved or trying to get more involved. So TikTok, Snapchat, a bunch of platforms now have rolled out creator marketplaces to connect creators and brands directly on their platforms. I'm curious, have you used any of these marketplaces, or why or why not? And who do you think is kind of the target for them? Do you want to start, Samir?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, the marketplace removes a lot of nuance from what it actually is like to do a brand partnership. I've seen specifically, I would say through YouTube and Brand Connect, a lot of creators that I know have worked through that and have gotten positive deals, but a lot of it is challenging to incorporate the nuance that's required to, especially I would say specifically for us who have a niche audience, even a hyper targeted niche audience. I almost feel like we have to explain ourselves to the brand or have to do our pitch, and or a brand has to watch our content to truly understand. So if you're, kind of loading in our engagement rates, our subscriber count, our metrics, we might not get as relevant of advertisers. And one thing that we really try and make sure is that, it hurts our video if people are skipping over the ad. It drops our retention and changes the dynamic of our completion rate of our video. So as creators, our goal is to make sure that every part of our video is engaging and entertaining. And one of the ways we do that is making sure that we have relevant brands in our videos, because if it's a relevant brand, then audience that's watching is going to be interested. So we pay a lot of attention to the retention rate during the ad to make sure that we're keeping that up. And I've noticed that in the marketplaces, it's not as relevant to brands because they're looking at creators as like a commodity, right? Or viewership as a commodity. And I think that removes nuance. Now, on the other side, if you are someone who has a mass audience and maybe it's more of a, broad scope and not as niche, I actually think it's really beneficial to find deals in that way. But nothing will ever replace the like get on a Zoom call or meet in person and pitch what your brand is about and hear the brand out about what they're about and finding that partnership. Nothing will replace that. But yes, maybe it can support, the startup creator or someone who is not as familiar with building a media kit and pitching their brand. They can find a lot of deals, but I'd just be wary of how much nuance that it removes, especially if you're a niche or targeted audience.
Yeah, Shannon, what about you? Have you ever used any of these marketplaces?
I've not personally used them, but I do think kind of like what Samir is saying, I think they're really beneficial for like micro influencers, people who don't know exactly how to pitch themselves as a brand, or maybe don't necessarily have a strong brand yet, but have like a small following. Especially people who are like not looking for a long-term influencer, like, lifestyle. Like if you're just like, hey, this like TikTok popped off one time and I am a dentist and I have no intention of becoming an actual influencer. Sure, I'll do this like toothpaste brand deal and not really think much about it. Cause I think like a lot of those marketplace brand situations kind of lack integrity. Unfortunately, because you're not having those calls, because you're not talking to the brand directly, and it's like just kind of like these one-off little things. I think they're very addy. It's very much like, this is a product placement. Do you want to buy this thing? But I think they serve a purpose. And I have friends who've done like, these like micro little things. And it's like, cool, you have $200 extra this month to go to the bar. Like, if that's how you're thinking about it, I think it's cool. Why not? Like, why not take that money? But I don't think it is, I don't think it's like fine-tuned enough to really work that well with anyone with an established brand, unless it's like what Samir said too. If you have a really wide audience and you're down to just like throw something in, for sure. But yeah, I think you could get better though. I think there's like a potential for that to like really get more targeted and have more integrity at some point. But yeah, right now it feels very ad.
It almost suggests that every view is created equal. And I don't believe that. I actually wholeheartedly disagree with that. So I would say that, maybe there's one category where every view is created equal, but a lot of times, like I mentioned, the brand won't necessarily know the creator. They're kind of, engaging with the marketplace and looking for a certain level of impressions or views, and then suggesting that each one of those views and impressions is created equal or is priced equally. And so I think that is a challenge. But it does open the door for the, part-time creator or the startup creator to feel what it's like to do a brand partnership. But again, as you get more established, it's just your views are not created equal. Your brand is not equal. You are exactly who you are, and you have to define that, and you have to pitch that, and you have to build that brand story.
I'd love to end on creator burnout. I think we've skirted around it a little bit sometimes in this conversation, but I think it's such a challenge for creators to cope with, and something that's not always well understood by your audiences, who think you're living the dream and kind of living out your YouTube dreams. So what are your coping strategies, and what kind of role can brands play to help alleviate some of the burnout and stress of this career?
Burnout is incredibly real. I would say it's real across the board, whatever career you're in, but specifically on the creator side, I think there's two things that really contribute to it and have led me down that path. One is, I think burnout is creative output without direction. And so I think as a creator, sometimes you have an idea you want to express and you start expressing it, and then maybe an audience starts to follow it, and you actually don't take a step back to be like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And one of the most challenging parts, the reason why it's hard to create a direction, is because the internet and making money on the internet or generating audience on the internet is almost uncapped. It's only capped by your willingness to work. And so when you're laying in bed at night as a creator, you kind of lay there and you go, well, I could be doing another episode a week, or I could be doing, like, what's stopping me from that? It's just my willingness to work. And that's a very dangerous place to get to if you don't understand your direction or where you're headed. So at the end of 2019, Colin and I felt that way. We had been creating with not much direction. We didn't know our why. We didn't know our mission. We didn't know exactly where we wanted this to go. We didn't even know what was enough, right? We didn't know what was enough money to make. We didn't know any of those answers. And that led us to, I have a screenshot of our P&L at the end of that year, showing negative $18,000 or $18,000 in debt. We were just creating without direction, feeling like we were good creators, but not able to build a sustainable career. And that was probably the lowest point for us. That was a point of incredible burnout where we were just not enjoying it, and also just emotionally drained from it. And what supported us to come back was actually some of the long-term brand partnerships that gave us the stability to take a step back and say, why are we doing this? Why do we create? Is it to make X amount of money? Is it for a mission? What is it? And where we landed was just like, what we are doing, if we can make a living doing it, if we can make a living bringing our ideas to life, and more specifically speaking to a community of creators, a community that we're a part of, and having a transformative effect of educating them, then we're happy. And I think that recognition of like what we are currently doing, if we can tweak a few things, that is the dream, and anything above it is a bonus. That supported us in this understanding of our direction, and then starting to set goals and operate more like a company. We set quarterly goals, we set annual goals, we set personal goals. We sat together and said, what do you want out of this career? What are, the lifestyle things that you want? We were working through the weekends, late nights. We were not spending time with our partners. And I think, we just took that huge step back and wrote out what's a week in the life of Colin and Samir that's ideal. What's a day in the life? What's the amount of money we want to be making? All these things. And once they became very tangible, then you start to recognize what you're working towards. And then that creative output has direction, and you're funneling it towards goals. And I would say also being honestly happy with those goals is really important, because what I've noticed about growth is that it all becomes very relative. Like I would be over the moon when we would get 5,000 or 10,000 views on a video in the past. Today, if it's sub 100,000, we have a big team meeting and say like, what do we need to change about the process, right? And so there's so much that gets very relative. And I think recognizing your why is incredibly important. And then the second thing I would say is, as you start to grow as creators, building a team has been a massive X factor, because now, as the company grows and as things happen, it's not all on Colin and I. There was a time where if our content wasn't performing well, we felt inadequate as Colin and Samir. We are not able to generate viewership. We are not able to engage an audience. Today, as we've built a format and a process, it's almost like we look at it as a third party, and there's a team in this studio every day that's working on the show. And if the show doesn't perform, there was something that was broken in our process, and holding process to that highest standard is what we believe in now. It's not viewership. It's not anything beyond like, are we creating a positive team environment and a positive process to achieve these goals we've all set out for ourselves? So that's what I would say. I think it's a long-winded way of answering it, but we've had to actively work on this, actively work on our mental health, actively work on our health as a business, and sit with our entire team and set goals, both as a business and personally, to make sure that what we've chosen to do is for fun, right? We're creators because it's fun, and making sure that it's fun and enjoyable, and we're all living out this collective dream as well as our individual dreams is really important.
Shannon, what about you? You've also kind of expanded a little bit beyond social media to directing and some other projects.
Well, Samir, you're living dreams, because I'm still in everything is personal. So right. If something doesn't do well, it's on me. And if something does do well, it's also on me. But yeah, it's interesting. Also what you said about like things become relative. I feel that views and engagement is almost like an addiction. Like the first time you get a million views on like a YouTube video, like it's like a hit of dopamine, and then it just like, it's almost like, this might be problematic, but it's almost like what they say about heroin, that like you never get the same high as the first high, and then addicts are constantly chasing the first high. Yeah, so it's like this like thing of like diminishing returns. It's like it just stops feeling good after a while, especially when it's all personal. Like those accomplishments of like milestones of like, oh, when I get 250,000 Instagram followers, I'll feel happy. Then you hit it and you feel nothing. And then you're like, okay, 500,000, I'm going to feel great. Happens, nothing. So I think that contributes to the burnout, because your like drive for it, you realize is like, doesn't produce the same happiness that it did like at the beginning, where everything was new and everything felt good. Also my channel and my content that I made, especially like on YouTube and Instagram, has been super personal to me. So it was a lot about like my sexuality and my journey with my sexuality, and then a lot of my relationships, like my romantic partnerships. And I think the burnout of that also comes with like, you get to a point where you're like, I'm not sure how much of my life I want to share forever. And there's like a lot of judgment online. I'm super blessed to have like some of the coolest, nicest, most supportive followers. And I attribute that to my brand being really strongly based in being so personal and so open. And it's so much about sexuality that a lot of people see themselves in my journey, or my journey has in some way helped them come out, or, you know, these really personal things to your life. But yeah, like I think the directing and getting into more like photography and telling other queer stories comes from a place of burnout for me, where it's like, I still have this audience. I still care about this audience deeply. I align with the same reasons they align with me. Like they helped me come out almost as much as I helped them come out. And it's like, how can I create content for them now that has less to do with, I am Shannon Beveridge, I am a lesbian from Carrollton, Texas, and I have a sister and I have a mom and I have a dad and they're divorced. Like, it's like I could only go so deep into that before it's like, I don't really have that much more to say about it, or I don't know how much I want to say about it anymore. So yeah, creating content for that audience that's less personal to me is how I'm trying to now counter burnout, if you will. And I'm really excited about it. And also like working on a podcast now with my sister, where I think it gives me more leeway to talk about things that, like, my sexuality is a part of me, my relationships are a part of me, but that will open a door to talk about like, this is what I think about politics, and this is what I think about mental health, and this is what, like, avenues I didn't feel I had wiggle room within my YouTube content, I will now have in other forms of media. So yeah, I think for creators, my suggestion is when you reach a point of burnout, and you still have more to say, just finding a different way to say it maybe, and realizing that you are not pigeonholed into what you first started making. You can make all different kinds of format. And that's kind of the beauty of, although overwhelming, the way that social media has expanded, it also expands so much opportunity for you. And how brands align with that, I'm not exactly sure. I think maybe just trying to see, look at creators, see their integrity, see their story, try to understand them as a person, or their content like deeply, and find the people that you want to support. And if that travels into different avenues, like understanding if that still aligns with you, and try to, like, I don't know, support creators in the ways that they're trying to remain have integrity and whatever, have good mental health.
I think on that note, like, everyone right now, or a lot of people are talking about creators as a broad stroke, right? But I think what's really important is to talk about the creators and learn about these individuals that you're working with, because we are, human beings who are evolving, in different ways, and that is the important part, is that you'll evolve with us. So I think that's really important to not look at it in broad strokes as hey, these are creators, these are individuals, and get to know those creators. And the last thing I'll say, this is something that was very impactful that I heard yesterday. I was talking to, we did a podcast with Thomas and Amar from Yes Theory, and we were talking about this creator journey. They've gone up to all the way now. They've over 7 million subscribers. They've built this massive global brand. And we asked them, kind of this question of their opinion on, is it about the journey or the destination, kind of expecting a certain answer. And Amar said something that was very powerful. He said, it's about neither, it's about the company. And I think that is an incredibly impactful thing, that recognizing that as a creator, every day you're going to work with people. I think being in isolation is really challenging, and developing creative community is what makes this all really fun. And that's to me what's brought me a lot of fulfillment and fought against some of that burnout. Is just that I love the people that I work with every day, and the goals that we achieve are amazing. It's awesome, but those aren't the things that are going to make my life fulfilling. It's going to be the people that I'm creating with, the audience that we're creating for. It's all about the company and the community. And so I think that is, as a creator, one of the most important things to recognize, that creativity is about collaboration and community.
Lauren, let's end with you. What can brands do? How do you think about burnout from the brand side and not as a creator yourself?
Yeah, I think that if burnout is sort of a misalignment between the effort you're putting into something and then what you're expecting to get out of it, I can imagine that as a creator, if you're putting hours and hours and hours and your personal, effort into something, and then you're getting paid $10 from the creator fund, or the algorithm shifts, or whatever it is, that can be really challenging. And I imagine that one of the biggest stressors and drivers of burnout for creators is just the sort of ability to feel like you're able to make a living off of it and feel like it's sustainable. And so for me, and where I think brands can really help is one, paying creators, two, paying them fairly and equitably, three, hiring a diverse set of creators without tokenizing them, and then four, I think we've talked about this a lot, but trusting them to create content that's going to work for their audience and is also going to work for your brand. They're influential for a reason. They have an audience for a reason. And so I think brands just trusting creators to do their thing and paying them for it is where I can see brands helping alleviate some of this burnout that exists all over the place.
Thank you all so much for such an open and honest conversation. And we're going to open it up to Q&A in person.